Welcome to the 2022 NFL Draft with the Roar of the Lions UK podcast. I'm Matthew Turner alongside Steve and Tom as co-hosts, later to be joined by the UK Steelers podcast to break this all down. How you doing, boys?
Good. Yeah, let's get it.
Happy draft day, y'all.
It's been a long time coming. I think the Lions have given up on their season, at least in terms of hopes of the playoffs, sometime by mid-September. And so we are finally here after half a year of waiting. Something significant is coming. So here we go. Steelers to come on in about 15 minutes' time. So let's just get into a bit of discussion first up. And just before we start on the draft stuff, me and Ant were discussing the fact that this Deebo Samuel potential trade is still waiting in the wings. So let's address that first up. Rumours that the Lions and Jets are the biggest players in the market for Deebo Samuel. Apparently they want 2 first-round picks or a myriad of first and then later round picks. Are any of you guys buyers on whether you think it's legit, and do you want it to happen?
No, absolutely not. I know we had the discussion in our Discord yesterday, but going for Deebo, it goes against every ethos of what this rebuild is. This rebuild is building through the draft, getting your young players in, getting a plethora of talent there, building a base for yourself, and then eventually reaching a point where you can go all in with your money to create a contender and to give up 25 million a year, which it's going to cost to sign him, which is cap space that we don't have, and potentially picks 32, 34 and more. You're ruining your draft. You're ruining your cap for one guy who you're not going to be able to win with now. I get people want superstars and that here, but it's not the time for us. We're not in the situation to do it. This is for a team that's ready to go. It's a lot more closer than us. We need to carry on building through the draft, building our foundations here. You know, I want superstars here like the next guy, but we're not ready for him. And if they do it...
Right away, it's just completely against our ethos. And if you look at team needs, you know, we've got DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 2 immensely talented young players with still bags of development. And then look at the rest of the roster. The defense has still got so many holes. There's absolutely no way that we want to invest this kind of capital. You know, the Niners would absolutely want to rinse us. We just don't need to do it. It doesn't make sense. It's bullshit.
Yeah, not to just go in full agreement, but agree with everything you both said. I think 2 extra things to think/worry about. Obviously, the Rams organization have done this a lot in terms of moving draft picks for players, and I'm not against it. I just completely agree that it's not the right stage of where we are. It's not like we're trading 2 1s for Jalen Ramsey and he's the final piece to our defense, right? The other part of it is I just don't see Deebo Samuel as being the piece that we necessarily need. I think he fits a really similar role to someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we want to step into that role, that kind of flex piece, put him in the backfield a bit, do a load of different things. And so if it was so I wouldn't like it to be DK Metcalf either, but I could understand that a bit more because a more traditional X that we're looking for or something like that. So if you remove all that, I think there's a good chance Deebo Samuel is a better player than 32 and 34 put together when it all plays out. Still doesn't mean I have any interest in doing it.
So Ash is in the chat at the moment saying it won't happen until the clock is rolling, so expect chaos. He thinks that it'll be the Jets while they're on the clock at 10, and then they'll pull the trigger at that point. And I can definitely see that happen.
Agreed. And you know, just one more point here. So I've seen some people saying we should do this trade, but these are the same people who go on about positional value. And we talk about, you know, I'm fed up of talking about it, but people say like, you need to go edge in this draft because it's the best use of positional value, etc., etc. We've been saying with wide receivers now, the market's going that crazy for them. You're paying them that much money that it makes more sense to draft them, to get your rookies on their cheaper deals without having to pay the house and more for an experienced receiver. Like I said, we got Amon-Ra and got really good production out of him in the 4th round last year. We're paying him peanuts compared to this. So, you know, from a positional value point of view, you don't want to be spending 25 million a year on a guy when we can go out and get a very high level receiver this year. You know.
Yeah.
I would say if the rumor was that we were trading for Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Or signing him even.
could.
Yeah.
that's palatable because that's a position of need. Really, well, it's more palatable. Maybe it's not the most palatable solution there, but it's a position of dire need for us, and he'll be a center point for years going forward. With Debo, you also have to worry about the schematic thing of it. How much of his production is scheme? You can't scheme him as well, and the production goes down. You spend a hell of a lot of money on someone for that.
Sorry, was that a hypothetical if Tyrann Mathieu was interested, or do you mean have you seen that?
No, just in terms of like we're talking about superstars and are we ready for superstars? But he's I guess a superstar that's available. Are we just saying no superstars, or are we saying, well, actually there are a couple of players still available that we could invest some, cap into?
Always in the market for good players with the right contract at any position. Don't really care. This roster is not good enough to turn down caliber players. But when it costs caliber players, when you're trying to build a team from the ground up, giving up draft capital to do it as well doesn't make sense together. It's the two together which make it unpalatable for me. I'm not against Debo in general. If he was a free agent, I'd be saying we should go all in for him, but he's not.
I think that's the thing. It's the draft pick aspect of it. We need all the draft picks we can get to fill more holes on this roster, because obviously you ain't going to land on everybody in a draft. Some people aren't going to work out. So the more picks you got, more chances you got filling more holes in one go. And, those 32 and 34 picks potentially are trade chips for extra picks as well. So you're not just giving up those 2 picks, you're potentially giving up 2 or 3 more if we're going to trade back for some of them. So,
yeah.
We need those rookies to come in. We have a hell of a lot of cap space coming into next year. If we can get this draft pretty much right and carry on building the way we are this time next year, we're going to have a whole lot of cap space at our disposal, and we're going to have a team full of talented rookies here. Only then you can start getting your big guys to come in and complement them all. We've just got to be patient. This was never going to be a 12-month fix after what Quinn Trisha did to us. This is a big situation we're trying to work out of.
Right, let's move on from this now and have a little bit of a talk about the draft before our Steelers guys come on. If you're interested in our previous coverage, we've talked with Eric Schlitt from Pride of Detroit, Ryan Matthews from Pride of Detroit, amongst other people about what we might do. So go back and have a look at some of those videos, or it's available on your audio platforms as well. But the big narrative this morning is, well, I guess what's happening at the top of the draft. There seems to still be no consensus about what the top 10 is going to look like, but it does look like there is a consensus forming around the first overall pick, with Trayvon Walker now an overwhelming favourite in the betting markets. It looks like that Bulky, the GM at Jacksonville, has won out in that battle for who they're going to draft, which is going to be interesting because for me, I don't know how you feel if this is how the chips fall, but it would be one of the biggest reaches in recent draft history, because drafting a quarterback for traits at number 1 rarely happens. You normally get a not proven guy, but at least a guy who's produced at that level at quarterback at 1 overall. Sometimes at 3, you might get a quarterback you're drafting entirely for traits, like we saw last year with the 49ers. But when you're drafting a non-quarterback, you're looking at edge and tackle, and these guys are utterly dominant, and that's why they're going number 1. Now, Walker is a very good player. Very good run defender, elite athleticism, but the production is not there, and there's all kind of reasons why that production isn't there. But to take that guy number 1 overall, I don't know. What do you guys think on whether this is the way it's going to go?
I mean, I can see where they're coming from. I mean, I'm sort of in the same battle with pick 2 at this moment in time. You've got the 3 edge rushers there, but who do you bet on? Obviously, you're going high in the draft. Do you take the safest option, which is potentially Aiden, out of the 3 of them? I think he's probably got the highest floor of the lot of them. Or do you swing for the fences and potentially go for the guy who could be the greatest player of them all? Now, obviously, Walker has the athletic upside to potentially be the greatest player of all 3 of them, but you're counting on a hell of a lot of other stuff going right for him. His production at college was low for, a guy like him and the guys around him. Nearly half of his production is sacks, and that were unguarded or cleanups. His team did a lot of work for him there. He's going to be the main guy somewhere. You're betting on a real rapid upturn of form for him to do that. However, if he fulfills his potential, he could potentially be the best out of the three. So you do see that. For me, I think that's Thibodeau, which is why at 2 I kind of would rather go for him than the safe option. I'd rather swing for the fences and try and get the higher reach, the higher ceiling guy who could potentially be more of a game changer as he goes on. But it's a terrible decision. I think they need to be having this discussion about Thibodeau and Hutchinson, not Walker and Hutchinson. Use the same logic, but with different guys.
I tweeted Math Bomb about this because I guess where my issue comes with it is it's not that Trayvon Walker's a bad player, and I don't think anyone really in this group has said that. We're talking about him as one of the best athletes to enter the NFL at his position, which is completely accurate. But we're not comparing him against guys who are bad athletes or even average athletes. So we're comparing him against, and I'm just going to numbers off the top of my head, but I think whereas Trayvon Walker on the RAS score is a 9.99, Hutchinson is like a 9.84 or something, and Thibodeau is a 9.6 something. So we're talking about guys who are in the 97th percentile athlete for Thibodeau and 99th percentile athlete for Hutchinson. These are still really elite athletes. So I don't understand how you can say the upside is that much higher with Trayvon Walker, because we're talking about such fine margins of athleticism, even at the NFL level. And I just don't believe that therefore that creates this incredible upside for Trayvon Walker that the others don't necessarily have. So whilst I agree, I don't think Hutch has the high-end upside, I really struggle to believe that the upside as a pass rusher of Trayvon Walker is that much higher than for Thibodeau. What I do think is he's got, because of his frame, a higher upside as a run defender. But I just don't buy into the fact he's going to turn into Myles Garrett because he has the same athletic profile.
Can't hear you, Steve. Sorry, there we go. There you go.
Situationally, it's a really difficult decision for the Jags. But if you look at the spot they're in, they're the worst team in the league in terms of record. They've committed their draft capital last year to Trevor Lawrence. He's their future, and they absolutely need to protect him. Now, I know they've just signed, I think, Cam Robinson to a big contract at left tackle, but the rest of their O-line is terrible. Surely, if you were the Jags and you had the number 1 pick, you'd be trying to trade out of it and try and pick up one of the, like someone like Evan Neal, who's got such versatility, try and pick him up around spot 7 or spot 8. Why would you kind of waste that number 1 pick on an edge when it's your O-line that is absolutely needs surgery?
But if you want to trade out of one, and I've got no doubt that they're trying to trade out of one, I think everyone in the top 5 is trying to trade down. If you're trying to trade down from 1 and no one wants to come up, then the asking price is deflated. You might get Atlanta say, yeah, we'll move from 8 to 1. We'll give you a 5th round pick. That might be what the market is saying that pick is worth. And then do you move down at any cost? So the Jags are going to say, we want Evan Neal. We'll move down to 4. And if we have to move down to 4 to get Evan Neal because that's where he should be taken, we'll accept a 4th round pick in return or something like that. Like, how far does your argument extend?
Even with a slower trade market, you're still going to get more draft capital than that. Someone is going to fall in love with a player, whether it's a quarterback, and I know there aren't those quarterbacks this year, but there's still teams without starting quarterbacks on the roster.
That's absolutely true, but if you talk about, so Carolina can't trade up because they got no picks. Maybe Atlanta or Seattle could trade up from 8 or 9. Maybe Pittsburgh, and we'll talk about this with Simon in a minute, could trade up from 20. But
Saints, Eagles.
Sure, but you said you wanted Evan Neal for the Jags, but we're now talking about trading down to the teens or the 20s. They're not going to want to trade down that far, so you're taking a bad deal to move down a little bit, or a good deal to move down too far. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like, much like we are, the Jags are in an impossible position where anything they do is bad. Pretty much. Unless they can find someone to fleece because they're a mug. But I just don't believe that's true anymore.
I think it's been a chaotic off-season, and when you look at the free agency market, it's just been mental. And I struggle to believe that we're going to have a calm draft where nothing big happens in the first 10 picks. I just think a GM somewhere is going to go crazy.
I hope you're right, because they're going to make this draft so good. If Walker is a pick at 1, just quickly from you guys, pick at 2, who do you want? Who do you think it will be?
Thibodeau is the guy I want. I think I've been on that train for a while. But Hutchinson is the guy I would expect. Honestly, I'd be fine with both. Thibodeau, I don't have them a million miles apart. But yeah, Thibodeau, my preference. Hutch is who I think it will be.
Yeah, I know I've given him a lot of grief on the offseason and that, but, I think I would prefer Thibodeau to be the pick sack safe. We've not spent big on edge in ages. And if we're going to spend on edge in this one, I would rather go for the guy with the higher ceiling. I would rather go for the guy who we can get more out of for me. I think he's potentially the biggest game wrecker of the lot of them. I think Hutch is the safe option. And I don't know, just the way they seem to have gone about it, the way Holmes really seems to have taken an interest in Thibodeau, and that I feel like the war room is split, but Brad gets final say. He's the GM. I think if it comes down to a call of seniority, he gets it. We get Thibodeau.
With either, like Tom, I think either pick is good. I'd probably err on the side of Thibodeau, just as Tom said, because of the ceiling. I don't believe that there's a risk there in terms of like any of this character stuff, because I think the Lions will have absolutely done due diligence. So I just don't see the kind of like risk that people are talking about. But I think also Hutchinson's a great pick. So either of those two I'd be fine with. But I'd rather be taking them at 5. I'd rather have the one I least want at 5 rather than out of the two, the best one at 2.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you on that. I want Hutchinson. I think the kind of local nature of it, the way that he carries himself, I just really, really like him as a person. So I'm indifferent to either of them as what they can produce on the field. So I'd like the guy I like more, which is Hutchinson. I expect Thibodeau. I think Thibodeau will be the pick at 2. I've seen several insiders suggest that Thibodeau is going to be the pick, but it isn't corroborated anywhere else, so it's just rumours for now. So there we go. I don't know if Simon is ready to chat. He's here. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
From the UK Steelers podcast. Thank you so much.
Can you hear me? Am I visible?
Yeah, you're here.
Hello. How are you doing, guys?
Very, very well.
Merry draft day, by the way.
And to you.
It's like Christmas Eve over here last night.
I know. Thank you for joining us so early. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, guys. Thanks for having me back again. It was fun to do this last year. I think I did it on day 3 last year, kind of in the middle of the draft, and we were talking about all your picks and what we'd done. So it's good to join you before the draft. And hey, guys, I'm shocked by the things you're saying. I think it's interesting when we've been doing this now for 12, 13 weeks, talking about every position in the draft. You kind of have this little embodiment of your own opinions that start to grow out of the 3 or 4 guys that you speak to every week, right? And I think the rest of the league maybe is thinking that you guys, if they don't go Hutch number 1, that's just a nailed-on pick. There's just no chance. And you guys are sat here talking about, the majority of you want Thibodeau, and that's crazy to me. Well, not so much in the player. I like Thibodeau a lot as well, but to me, just that Michigan connection and just the hometown kid, and it is just a no-brainer for me. And he is a game wrecker, and my number 1 prospect in this draft by some margin. So yeah, I'd be shocked if you passed on him, but interesting to hear that.
I mean, it's kind of funny because the betting markets kind of reflect that as well, because Hutchinson, I think, is 10 to 7 on to be the 2nd overall pick. So in American money, that's minus 130 or so. But Thibodeau is evens. So there's very little to pick from that, plus 100 in America. So the market's fairly split, and I think that comes down to whether Walker is the pick at 1. Is that difference? Otherwise, I think they're basically 50-50. But anyway, let's move on from the Lions, because we can talk about them for days, and talk about the Steelers. So your season last year, kind of, you had hope.
It fizzled out, you can say it.
Sorry?
Fizzled out, you can say it.
It did fizzle out. There were some strong wins in there down the stretch, but, Roethlisberger's gone now. You're picking at 20. You got 7 picks in this draft, so it's 20, 52, 84, 138, 209, 226, 242. What did you think of last year, and what do you think is going to kind of happen early doors in this draft?
I think there's 2 really key things to take from the Steelers season last year. Firstly, it was the Big Ben retirement tour, right? I think that's what the season was. Everybody knows what Ben's limitations were last year. We kind of felt like we spent the whole year talking about it on the podcast, and it was strange because you could see that he just didn't have the power in the deep ball. There was struggles there. It was hard for him to throw across the middle of the field. But he had transitioned to this kind of quick throw offense where he was getting the ball out really quick. And, it worked at times. I know, he was kind of dunked on by the national media and stuff. He wasn't the worst quarterback in the league, but it was not a sustainable option long-term, obviously. And I think the way the season ended, where you kind of got that win in Cleveland, which got rid of a few demons from the season before, made the playoffs with that win in Baltimore in the final week. And then we were always going to get waxed by KC in the playoffs. But it was a nice kind of end to the season, I think, overall, a nice retirement tour for Ben. And I think the other thing to take from it is the offense's struggles outside of Ben. The running game, obviously, we drafted Najee Harris. I think he's a great back. He's a 3-down back. He's a guy who is going to be kind of dominant in the league, I think, in the next 2 or 3 years. I think people are going to see the kind of back Najee Harris is when we get an offensive line that can support him a little bit. But the running game just never really was able to get going. You look at some of Najee's big games, he was getting 183 yards, 105 yards, 122 yards. He was the leading rusher in every game. But then you see some other games where he's down to like 23, 62, 40, 45 rushing yards per game, and he just could not get anything going. He was operating with absolutely no space. So the Steelers have gone and tried to fix the run game sort of in the offseason. And what I will give credit to Kevin Colbert for doing is making sure every hole is at least filled. There is no position the Steelers couldn't walk into tomorrow and start an NFL game. This is a pretty complete roster, if not an exciting one in a lot of positions. We've just re-signed our strong safety, Edmonds, who we thought was going to walk, and we ended up getting him back on a 1-year deal. That was what I think a lot of people were pegging as our biggest need. And then obviously quarterback, right, is the sexy talk, because that probably is the need we need to fill. But I'm personally not in favor of drafting up for a quarterback. I don't want to get rid of our 2nd round pick. I think there's great value to be found at kind of linebacker or receiver in the 2nd round, which are both areas of need for the Steelers. And I really don't want to get rid of next year's 1st round pick, because from all I hear, my uneducated college knowledge is that next year's draft is going to be maybe a little bit hotter in terms of offensive talent. So for me, if Malik Willis was to fall to 20, no problems, no qualms at all. Take him on, bet on the upside. I don't love his tape, I've got to be honest. Malik Willis is probably not my number 1 quarterback, but I understand the ceiling he definitely is. So I've got no problems with taking him at 20, but I would not be trading the future for him.
How about you guys? What questions? Sorry.
What are your thoughts on, obviously, Kevin Colbert stepping down after 20 plus years? I actually don't know how long he's been there, but it feels like a long
time. Yeah. My entire fandom.
Yeah. What are your feelings on that as kind of a part A to the question? And part B, do you think with him stepping down, that maybe reduces the chance of him mortgaging the house to move up, because the people at the top are probably going to put a pause on that? And you never want a guy who's obviously not dead man walking because he's retiring, but you don't want someone kind of mortgaging the house to go up and do it.
Well, it's a weird situation because it's not like the Steelers haven't been interviewing other GM candidates, right? They did stuff at the Combine. They've been just kind of going through this process the whole time. And initially we thought that somebody would be coming in before the draft and Colbert would just be kind of hanging around to help out, given his great record. But it's definitely going to be different. It's scary thinking about what life's going to be like after Kevin Colbert. But for me, it's a strange situation. I'm sure you guys agree. Like, to have this GM in place, kind of making a final pick, it's similar to what the Ravens had, right, when they drafted Lamar Jackson. And to me, it really does feel like Colbert wants to kind of part ways with the Steelers, having set them up for the future. The Steelers, they don't do smoke screens with the draft. People are like, well, Colbert's just operating a smoke screen. He doesn't really do smoke screens. He tells you who he wants, and then he goes and drafts the dude. He did it last year with Najee Harris, and he's doing it this year with Malik Willis. The only question is, what is the appetite for quarterbacks from other teams? Are the Falcons interested? Are the Panthers interested? Are the Seahawks interested? If not, and he starts to slide, I expect to see the Steelers jump into the early teens if he does fall. I'd be a little bit surprised. I could see it, but I'd be a little bit surprised if he moved to kind of 7 or 6. But if he does fall to the early teens, Colbert is going to try and just cement his legacy on this team for years to come.
So who are you targeting with that then? Are you looking at who is even in that order there? So we've got Houston at 13, Baltimore at 14, that sort of area. Philly look like they want to trade down or up. Doesn't really matter to them by the looks of it. So that sort of area.
Yeah, I should have pulled the draft list up to kind of bring about a specific team. Like I said, there's been a lot of talk about the Panthers because they obviously need picks. You were mentioning that just before. If they maybe weren't in love with the quarterback, there's talk that a day trade could be made with them, even though that seems counterproductive. People talk about jumping ahead of them. I think maybe they would be open to trading back and taking whoever they can get at 20. But if not, yeah, so I don't have in front of me who the picks exactly are from 10 to 15, but obviously Baltimore's not going to be too interested, I wouldn't imagine, in letting us take Malik Willis. But yeah, I could see the Eagles. I think getting ahead of the Saints is a good, I think the Saints are a sneaky option to take a QB, one of those 2 first-round picks.
I don't really understand why no one's talked about the Saints taking a quarterback.
No, I don't.
Obviously, they made the move, and the talk was, they're going up again to go and get their guy, and they've kind of knocked that down and said not really. And I think as we've got closer to the draft, the thought of Pickett, Willis, etc., going in the top 5, the top 10 is kind of quietened off a bit. And whilst one of them may go there, wouldn't surprise me. It feels like at least one of them is falling down to that kind of 15 to 20 range, where you would think the Saints with 16 especially are going to be all over that. So yeah, for me, I think the Eagles at 15 is the jump spot, a team that wants to move back. And I think any team who wants a quarterback, whether it's the Steelers, the Titans, any of these guys, need to get to 15 really if they want one of, especially if no quarterback's gone at that stage and you want to take your choice.
Yeah. And what do you guys think about taking Malik Willis at 2? I know that was the early consideration. That's dropped off significantly. I'm getting a lot of shaking heads.
we've never been on that train. Not even thought about it.
Too rich.
I mean, so our argument that we actually talked about a lot is, do we want him at 32? And there was a lot of people saying no on this pod. I'm very much in the yes camp, just because at that sort of level I can bet on the upside and I'm okay with it. But I'm still uneasy about it, because his bust rate is going to be so high that you might be lighting the pig on fire that you do if you take one in the 3rd round. So, but then you could be right, and you could get Lamar Jackson, but the new improved version, and
This is exactly what I was saying to the guys the other day. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've become cynical in my old age now. I've been watching the NFL for so many years, where it used to be that I'd be super excited about the idea of taking a quarterback or an offensive player, and now it's just this feeling of immense dread that he's going to be a total bust.
I think because the Lions obviously worked with Willis at the Senior Bowl, so they will have had like a really good look at him over 2 or 3 days. So if they do take him, and whether it's at 2, where I'd be incredibly uneasy, or at kind of 32, 34, I think we've probably just got to trust that they've absolutely had eyes on him, and they think that they've seen enough that they like, that reassured them that this is a gamble worth taking.
Yeah. He absolutely has a high bust rate. I think I've just gone back to a draft 3-4 years ago, so we can kind of make fair assessments of these guys. But the reality is, if you take pick 32 and 34 the Lions have, one of them is probably going to either bust out or underperform, because that's the way the draft goes. And I'm in the 2018 draft now, picks 30 to 34, Mike Hughes, Sony Michel, Lamar Jackson, Austin Corbett, Will Hernandez. I would say Hughes, Michel, Hernandez disappointed. Jackson has obviously exceeded expectations, and Corbett flamed out with Cleveland and then has done a nice job for the Rams. But basically, your hit rate isn't going to be that good anyway. Yeah. So I think from a capital standpoint, especially when you're investing in a quarterback, I think that's completely worth it for Willis. Or like, Willis is the only guy I'd want to take a 32, but I can understand the argument for picking one of the others as well, even though I'm just not a fan of it.
So you're going into this season, if you don't take a quarterback, with noted Lions slayer Mitch Trubisky. I know that you said that you potentially need to upgrade that position, but if you rolled into the season with him under center, are you, with that defense especially, and you've still got Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth had a great year last year, fantastic year. Are you still optimistic about how the year might go?
Yeah, I think I'm one of the guys that's a little bit more willing to give Mitch a chance. I don't think there's many people that think he's going to be anything more than a bridge QB, but I think Mitch has a little bit of untapped. I mean, you tell me, right? You guys probably know better than I do, but I think Mitch has got a little bit of untapped potential in there. He is a guy that has been in some real tough situations, right? And he didn't get a chance to show as much in Buffalo last year. So I'm totally open to seeing what he has in the tank. I don't think he's going to be the long-term option. But, if we aren't going to get value at QB in this draft, I've got no problems at all with rolling in with Mitch next year. I think, if anything, it might be a bit of a sigh of relief at times, because you're going to get him doing things in terms of rolling out, throwing on the move, the bootleg, and things that Matt Canada wants to do, our offensive coordinator, that we just could not do last year with Bennett. It felt like you were really trying to jam a square peg into a round hole last year in terms of the scheme that our offensive coordinator wanted to run and the plays that Ben was trying to dial up. These things really did not gel. So I think Mitch is going to slot right in, and even if it's kind of at a league average level or below, just fill that scheme a lot better and be able to do the things that he wants to do on offense. So I'm totally fine with doing it for a year and just seeing how it goes and then reassessing this when we get to the draft next year. I think the Steelers don't tank. The Steelers will compete and they'll be in and around the back end of the playoff conversation, I'm sure, until the late end of the season, whatever happens. So, I'm not too concerned. And bear in mind, if we don't take a quarterback at 20, there's a good chance we'll be ending up taking some elite defensive talent. One question I wanted to ask you guys, actually, in terms of that 20th pick, I think the 20th pick is a really interesting point because I've been saying it's like the cutoff for elite talent in this draft. So if one or two quarterbacks go before the Steelers pick at 20, I think there's a great chance there's an elite defensive talent. A Jordan Davis, maybe a Kyle Hamilton if I dare dream. But someone that I really like the tape on fall into 20. Whereas if there's no quarterbacks that go before us, it could be that first pick where I'm like, there's just really nowhere that I'm in love with going here.
I mean, it's really interesting. I get what you're saying, and it's so hard for me to distinguish between what is the elite talent and what is the very good talent. Because if I have a look at the board, and we were discussing this on our Discord channel yesterday, if you have a look at the guys earmarked on the consensus board we've built as between 33 and 64, so all the second round guys, I can make a case for all but 3 or 4 of them being first round guys.
Yeah.
So it's really deep. Now, how many of them are elite talents? I don't know, but we've got one of the biggest homers for Travis Jones in Ant here, who gives every
I love Travis Jones, dude.
He could be available at the end of the first round or top of the second. And is he elite or not? Ebiketie and Maffei at that sort of edge outside linebacker position could be fantastic talents. I'm a big Ridder guy. At quarterback, he could be fantastic if he comes on with his accuracy. He's got all the tools. He's my QB1.
Okay.
You have Daxton Hill, who's the best slot corner
Love
in this.
Daxton Hill.
Yeah, so
I'd take Daxton Hill with that first pick, no problem. I love Leo Chanel. That's my dude, by the way. I don't know if you've watched him.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So Ash, one of our writers, does not like him. I've been having a big debate through, but I think there's such great talent all the way through the first and second rounds that I just want to trade back and accumulate picks in those first 2 days.
I hear you.
Whatever. I'll take Devontae Wyatt is the best DT for me over Jordan Davis too. So what can you do? But so you want to go defense at 20? That's the summation.
That is kind of the way I am. I do wonder if that's just me being kind of a little bit conservative, being a bit of a defensive homer. But yeah, that is kind of the way I want it. Unless a receiver falls. If there's a guy like Drake London, wow, I'd be running that pickup. Maybe even Olave or Garrett Wilson, I'd be really tempted as well, depending on who's on the board. But I think probably defense. Just looking at the way this draft would fall and the kind of guys that would be available. And Andrew Booth Jr. we have need at corner. If a Devin Lloyd fell, I'd be interested. I think defense, if not quarterback, would be the way I would go.
I was going to ask you, Simon. One of my favourite moments, and the guys are going to groan now, was that early on in the season. We played the Bengals and we were talking about the Bengals on the podcast, and I said to the guys, I think the Bengals have got a great chance to win the AFC North. And I can't tell you, Simon, the mocking, the disdain, absolutely ripped to pieces. And obviously, being an upstanding character, I've taken the opportunity to rub this in their faces all the way to the Super Bowl. But thinking from your point of view as a...
Oh, sorry, Steve, you're muted. Sorry.
So on our podcast, Gav, who's my co-host, he controls the soundboard. He would have blown out the trumpets for that. That would have been the self-congratulating trumpet you would have got.
I just wanted him to get to his question point and then immediately. Sorry, Steve, you were asking something.
Yeah, what I was going to say before I was very rudely interrupted was, with the kind of rise of the Bengals, how do you think the Steelers should kind of address that in the draft, and not necessarily just at 20, but in the second and third round? That Burrow, has been able to step up. You've seen what Chase has done. How do you think you kind of need to address your team needs to kind of, because that threat's going to be around now, and it's kind of credible. And obviously you've seen what has come in with the Browns.
I guess the problem with that as well is that you've got two very different quarterbacks in division. It's not like you can kind of go, oh, they all play this one way, so we can defend this one way. You've got to account for Lamar as well as the Bengals too. So
yeah, and Deshaun Watson now, right? And it's not just the team that has to account for that. There's certain professions within the city of Pittsburgh that got to be careful now as well. But don't get me started on the Browns. You thought I hated the Bengals. The Browns have gone right up there. But we've always traditionally had a great time with Lamar Jackson. We've done pretty well. I think our defensive line has held up well with Lamar Jackson in the games that he's played. He's actually missed a lot of games against Pittsburgh, weirdly, with various illnesses and stuff, given that he doesn't miss a lot of games. But we've done a decent job with him. What concerns me is Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and whoever else they want to bring over. I started last season. I wasn't saying they were going to make the Super Bowl, but I did say that they were the best wide receiver trio in the league. And that proved to be correct. I was getting a lot of hate for that, saying that the Steelers trio was better, which was, I thought, laughable. In terms of what we need to do, I think the problem we have is that our secondary is the weakest part of our defense, and it's also the part that's going to get shown up when the Bengals roll into town. Joe Hayden is moved on. We've signed Levi Wallace from the Bills, who is kind of a solid outside guy with good range, but is kind of a limited athlete. He's done well in that cornerback 2 role for Buffalo, but I don't think he's the guy you want to kind of operate on Chase. We have Cam Sutton, who's I view as more of a slot corner, but would probably project to play on the outside right now, based on what we have. So we do have a desperate need in the secondary, specifically at corner, but the value just isn't there, especially in the first round, I don't think, unless maybe an Andrew Booth Jr. falls and you can just about snag him. I think after him, in my opinion, there's a bit of a drop-off in the cornerback class. And I hate being forced to try and address that in the second round, when there's so many great kind of like linebackers, wide receivers, as I mentioned already, that you can target in the second round. I hate being forced to kind of go at a subpar corner, especially when the Steelers have got a horrible draft history. That's our bogey pick position. We cannot draft corners whatsoever, as Artie Burns will attest. So it is going to be difficult, I think, to specifically address the difficulties that we face in division. The Steelers might have to eat some crow for a little while, until we find a quarterback and can draft a defense that can compete with the likes of Jamar Chase.
Oh, it's a rough one, isn't it? I'm looking down your depth chart now, and some of it just looks so good that it only needs a couple of pieces. But you're talking about linebacker, and I'm seeing Miles Jack in there now, which obviously is one of your signings from the Jags. One of my big favourite players. I've finally left an organisation, potentially the only one worse than ours in recent years. But alongside Jack and Bush, and then obviously you've got Watt as the 3-4 outside linebacker, and Alex Highsmith in there too. Like, where does another linebacker fit into that group? Are you kind of looking to rotate people in and out of that?
So I think the concern Steelers fans have is Devin Bush. Devin Bush we're now teetering on the calling him a bust point. The thing with Devin Bush is he had the injury 2 years ago. He had a torn ACL, missed a lot of not last season, the season before, came back last season. And there's been some concern, is he going to be the same guy or is it going to take some time for him to recover, because he was a sideline to sideline guy who relied on that athleticism. He's undersized. In many ways, similar to Nakobe Dean this year. Gav on our podcast is really big on Nakobe Dean. I personally don't see it because of the Devin Bush experience. It's another undersized guy who is great at blitzing, can run sideline to sideline. You think you can drop into coverage and do everything you want to do with him. But when you get to the NFL and he faces a brick wall, he can't stack and shed and he can't get off blockers. And unfortunately, Devin Bush's case, he can't cover either. So we're at a point now where we've got to start thinking about, is Devin Bush going to be a reasonable option for the full season? So that's why I talk about linebacker. I think that's why that's a big need, because I think you need to start planning for what you want to do after Devin Bush. The sneaky one is Akello Weatherspoon we've just signed. I don't think this gets a lot of pop. We got him from the Niners last year for a 5th rounder. He didn't play a lot at the start of the season. There was a bit of consternation as to why, about whether he wasn't fitting in quite right. But that's the guy where we could be getting some sneaky cornerback talent coming through, because in the games that he did play at the back half of that season, the dude attacked the ball like a real number one corner. Like he was knocking the ball down. He was getting interceptions in a way that the Steelers secondary did not do all year. And he looked like a number one corner out there at times. So if he could develop into that, and we could just kind of get a freebie from the Niners there, then that might sort the secondary out with Levi Wallace on the other side. One sneaky one to watch for us is defensive line. I know it looks stacked. We've got Cam Hayward, Tyson Alulu's coming back from injury, and Stefan Tuitt. Tuitt, unfortunately, did not play all of last year after the death of his brother. There's still a lot of kind of that's up in the air. We don't know where Tuitt is. There was talk that he listed his house in Pittsburgh. He's been in the facility, but we don't really know whether he's going to come back to football or not. And if he doesn't, then there's a glaring need at kind of defensive end, like D-line, so to go alongside Cam Hayward, especially with the run defense concerns. So, John Davis, Devontae Wyatt, definitely on the board.
So if you were going to, I'm sure you've kind of done mock drafts and what have you on the pod. If you
Did
were
one last night.
just a few.
Who didn't?
If you were going to kind of sculpt out some sort of semi-realistic best case scenario for you guys all the way down, not all the way down to like the day 3, but day 1, day 2, who are the sort of guys that you would really, really love to see coming out of this draft with?
If I had to construct a perfect scenario,
semi-realistic, perfect.
Semi-realistic, so I can't have Derek Stingley, is it?
Well, I mean, yeah, if he doesn't go 3 overall, then you might, I don't know.
I'd be more tempted to trade up for him, dude, than Malik Willis. But I think if one of these wide receivers was to fall, either a kind of a Garrett Wilson or Drake London, I don't think Jameson Williams is really the fit for us, but maybe even a Chris Olave. I think to get a guy like that who can really take the top off a defense would really improve Mitch's chances. And then when we look to getting a quarterback maybe next year, if we do want to move on, that would be ideal for me. I think someone to pick up that wide receiver 3 role. We have just signed Miles Boykin off waivers from the Ravens, and there's a bit of upside there. But Claypool struggled last year, and we don't know what's going to happen with Deontay Johnson, who's in the final year of his contract. So that he's probably going to want more money than we might be willing to pay. And then in the second round, I'd love to go linebacker, dude. There's just so much depth. Troy Anderson is just a guy, a moldable ball of clay. I just want to get in my hands and go for a beer with, and and just set him up to do everything. And maybe he can play running back for us as well. A Chad Muma is, a great option. I do want to see him get a little bit more physical. I thought he would be my favorite linebacker in the class before this whole process started. It didn't end up happening, but I do like what he does around the line of scrimmage. So I think a linebacker, because there's just so many options, maybe a Quay Walker falls, maybe a Leo Chanel, right? That's my dream pick at 52. So yeah, I think that's where I'd quite kind of like to go and fill that gap if there's no secondary players that scream out to you.
Just trying to see where Leo Chanel works out in the consensus board. He's 59.
Yeah, so it seems possible, but then he's one of these guys that you also hear like, oh, maybe he sneaks into the first round. But I feel like I've heard that about 70 dudes. So I don't know what's real anymore. I'm just going to sit down tonight and hope for the best.
What else do we have? I'm just looking through this, trying to find fits for you guys. I think that Calvin Austin would be a really interesting pick.
Yeah, so I'm big on Calvin Austin. I know he's a little dude. So I know that's a struggle for a lot of people, but that guy's electric. And if you can just get him to do some of that Rondale Moore stuff that we were seeing last year, I think we would have a day with him. I think he'd be a great kind of additional offensive piece for us.
If he does end up slipping a bit as well, I think Logan Hall, just what you mentioned about Stefan Tuitt and things at 52, a lot of versatility there, which would fit that kind of D-line need quite well. Who knows if he goes earlier than that, but his range seems to be a bit all over the map.
Yeah, another guy I hear a lot of is going to fit into the first round conversation. He was one of the first people that I thought that was going to happen with being outside first rounder, but at 52, I'd have no problems with that. I really need a corner, but I think that cornerback depth drops off really quick. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm not a big Kier Elam fan. I think after Andrew Booth Jr., I just don't know where the pick is. I struggle to see it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone you guys like in that day 2 to 3 range.
I think day 2 and 3, I think you're right. There's a clear drop off, and then you end up with a lot of questions. So you've got guys like Roger McCreary will probably be there at that stage, but really short arm guy. Yeah, exactly. As a fan, I don't think you have that much confidence. I think he'll probably be a nice player, but maybe he's only a nickel guy, and you really want to go for that. And then you have all the upside guys, so the crazy athletes like Tariq Woolen or Zion McCollum or people like that. But it's all question marks. So I think the upside guys for you might work quite nicely, because obviously your timeline is probably not to try and get back to the big game next year. But yeah, I think there's quite a clear tier drop off, as you say.
Just got a question from a listener. Sorry, Steve. Just got a question from Ash, just saying, what sort of defense does the Steelers run? And you're the best guys to kind of answer that. So you're looking for kind of man or zone kind of corner guys. You run kind of hybrid, don't you?
Yeah. Traditionally, kind of a little bit more zone. Obviously, we run a 3-4 base defense with TJ and Highsmith coming off the edge. But we are very rarely in base defense anymore. We play a lot of nickel. We're probably a bit more of a zone team. So if you're looking at corners on a base level, Gav's the expert scheme guy, but we'd be looking probably for more of a zone corner than a source gun, a press man kind of dude. Sorry, I don't know how in depth he wants to go with it, but yeah, we tend to run more of a kind of a 3-4 hybrid nickel defense.
I was going to ask you, Simon, again, sort of turn to the rest of the AFC North. The Ravens are picking quite early this year, and usually they tend to be picking later over the last few seasons. So they're at 14. What pick at 14 would you really dread? Would really look like kind of stick in your throat if you saw like the pick come in for the Ravens? Who don't you want to see at 14?
That's a great question, man. I think it would have to be one of these big guys up front that's going to bring pressure. I think John Davis is probably most likely. Are they after the Chargers or before? I'm forgetting now.
Four.
Okay, so yeah, I think because the Chargers I think would take John Davis if he's there, and if not, I think that is such a Ravens pick, man, to go up alongside Calais Campbell, who's just come back. I don't, you could see them going receiver again, but they can't just keep throwing stones at this receiver wall over and over again if they're not going to actually use the guys. They've still got Bateman and Hollywood Brown, and how many first round receivers do you want in offense where you don't throw the ball?
Don't know. Ask the Jets.
Or maybe a pass rush. If one of the kind of more elite level pass rushes fell to them, I don't think Jermaine Johnson's going to. We'll come back to that question very quick. I want to ask you this: Jermaine Johnson. I don't see him as a top 10 kind of talent, but all the talk is that he's a lock to be top 10. It's absolutely. Is there any chance this is just kind of like posturing from teams that are hoping that other edges will fall to them if they pump up Jermaine Johnson? Or do I need to take off my tinfoil hat?
I don't know. You've just woken up Ash again because he's an FSU fan, so he's the biggest homer.
I'm sorry. No, I do like him. I think he's a first round pick. But compared to some of these other dudes that he's being talked about going over, I just don't see it.
I think if you're at the end of the top 10, if you're a Seattle or a Jets, I think less likely, but one of these teams, and you can do anything in your power to try and get Thibodeau to fall, I don't see why you wouldn't put things like this out there. I think it's not, again, I like Jermaine Johnson as a player as well, but you get the impression that Thibodeau gets past 2. Maybe the Giants take him, but also maybe not. And so does he fall to 9? Does he fall past that? It wouldn't surprise me if there's a little bit of posturing going on. At the same time, different style player and probably safer than someone like Thibodeau if you want to deal with the off-field hassle in kind of very strong inverted commas. But yeah, so I think it's possible. Like I say, all the stuff that seems to come out in the few days leading up to the draft, I kind of tend to park. Now, we talked at the top about Trayvon Walker going number 1, and that seems much more legitimate than it did at the start of the week. So maybe I'm just chatting absolute nonsense. But it does seem like a lot of things seem to come out in the few days up to the draft, which don't necessarily hold value.
Yeah. Just to come back to your question, a pick that I would hate for the Ravens, because as I was thinking about the edges, George Karlaftis. That feels like just a powerful Ravens edge rusher that I do not want to deal with. And that's the kind of guy I'm talking about that I would take over Jermaine Johnson personally. And I think if he starts to fall, that would be a pick I hate. Just looking in I know then obviously if Cal Hamilton fell, I don't know if they really have much of a one at safety, but that feels like a kind of a Ravens guy who's going to patrol the back of that defense and just dominate for 10 years. So I'm sure you get it right. Who do you not want the Packers to take? I'm sure you're going to get that twice this year. So, it sucks to see great players that it's like you spend this entire process falling in love with these guys and then you see them go to the Bengals and the Browns and the Ravens, and it's heartbreaking.
You're just dreaming that the Packers have got, with 2 first-round picks, don't take a wide receiver, and Rodgers spends the entire summer in social media meltdown. That would be my dream scenario.
I got a friend who's a Packers fan. He insisted to me yesterday they will not take a wide receiver in the first round. There's absolutely no way.
It'd be beautiful.
It'll be some quarterback I've never heard of. Yeah.
Which picks up with you for 20 and go up and take Malik Willis. ridiculous. That would be all levels of funny.
They can take Kenny Pickett, dude, with small hands up in Wisconsin. I think he'll be fine.
Any questions, Anne? You're sitting there listening.
Well, you've grilled him pretty good over the last one. I was going to ask. Obviously, your next draft class coming up, but your last one that you had. Obviously, you Steelers surprised a lot of guys going running back, tight end first. Obviously, running back Najee Harris, who's had a really good year. Freiermuth seems to already have become sort of a cult hero there. Obviously, Dan Moore Jr. has had a rocky start, sort of worked his way in on that line. What's sort of your year one analysis of the 2021 group that you got in? How well did you think they did that year?
Yeah, good question. I think it's always good to look back and think about, not just focus on the future, but think about what happened last year. So Najee Harris, I was quite vocal against taking a running back in the first round. Not that I didn't love Najee, but it was just the positional value situation for me wasn't there. But we did it anyway, as I think I knew that we would. And Najee, like I said earlier, has shown me enough, just in the way that he plays the game. He's absolutely relentless. He's always going to fall forward for 3 more yards in the Le'Veon Bell way that he used to. He's a guy that's so hard to bring down. And for guys that maybe just didn't watch the Steelers every week last year, I think it's easy to look at the yards per carry and just the amount of carries that he had and say, well, this actually isn't that impressive. He was the leading rookie rusher, but he was the bell cow back. He was the only running back we had. Benny Snell, no thank you. So, I can understand why there's maybe some skepticism about Najee Harris in the league, but if you watch the way he plays the game, if this dude just wasn't getting hit behind the line of scrimmage at 2 yards on every single play, I mean, the only reason that he has like a 3 yards per average record is because he was gaining 5 yards from where he was getting hit. So Najee is a big plus, I think. Once and the offensive line has been shored up. We signed Ben Mason, the center, and we've kind of shored it up a little bit pre-draft to make sure that we're not pinned into that in the first round. And I think he's going to have a great sophomore year. Freiermuth has quickly become, as you said, a cult hero. My favorite player on this team all of a sudden, dude. Pat Freiermuth is just, I mean, everyone's saying it, right? But in that Heath Miller mold of just a do-it-all kind of classic tight end, he had some issues in blocking last year, but I think for a rookie tight end, I thought he was a great blocker overall. And then what he was doing, he was just so solid with his hands and some of the kind of, it felt like Ben last year. And think about how crazy this is for a rookie, especially when you look at like Kyle Pitts, who for all intents and purposes had a great year, but I don't think he was this for the Falcons. Ben would throw to him on third down in the really important situations more than Deontay Johnson, more than any target on that team, because he trusted Freiermuth more than anyone in his first year. And I think that's really impressive. And I love the way that he handled adversity as well. I think there was one, I can't remember which game it was, but it wasn't even a drop. It was a really, really tough, tight angled throw on the final play of the game into the end zone. He had it in his breadbasket and it kind of got dislodged by 2 guys that were coming into him at the same time. He dropped it and we lost that game. And apparently he took that really hard. And just kind of some of the things he came out and did after that really encouraged me about the kind of guy that he is. Kendrick Green was our third pick, who's the center. He struggled a lot last year. Couldn't snap the ball and was really undersized and did not have the power, I don't think, to play center. There's talk that he might move to guard. But I think he's going to spend a year on the bench because that was a really tough year for him last year. Dan Moore Jr. definitely grew into it, the 4th round pick, the left tackle. As you say, struggled early, but I think most Steelers fans are pretty confident about him now starting left tackle in his sophomore year because of the improvement we saw out of him at the end of the year. And then I won't go through every pick, but just one to shout out is Trey Norwood. We got him in the 7th round. Anyone who remembers the 3rd round last year, Mike Tomlin announced the pick and he didn't even announce his position. He just said, I think he said all around defensive Swiss Army man, which is kind of what he's been. And he made some really impactful plays for us. I think he literally won the first game of the season against Buffalo on the final play. So for a 7th round pick to get like a nickel kind of hybrid corner that fits into our system really nicely, Trey Norwood is one to watch to fill that Mike Hilton role that we lost to the Bengals.
Yeah, he was a guy that really showed up at the Senior Bowl and got a lot of love that way. I think you took Quincy Roche as well, didn't you?
Did
you do anything last year? Because he was another guy that at the Senior Bowl looked fantastic. I don't remember seeing anything of him last year.
No, I was big on Quincy Roche when we drafted. I was so excited to get him in the 6th round, and then we cut him, and the Giants picked him up in just after training camp before the season started. So, and he made their roster. So, I was disappointed by that. And we ended up with Taco Charlton as the consolation prize to be our kind of rotational edge. And to be fair, he did a fine job and he's moved on as well now. So I think there's room for an edge in the late rounds of this draft again to see if it sticks and be our kind of fourth edge rusher.
Yeah, I'm just on part of me. I'm just really glad that you took Najee Harris last year. That won me a lovely bottle of Barbudan rum that I've got up on my shelf at the minute because that won me our first round mock draft betting against Matt because he didn't think you were going to take a running back.
Come on, guys.
He is a positional value guy, but everything said Steelers are going running back. So, I appreciate you for that one. I just want to ask quickly about this year because I know they've asked a lot already, but we were split. Well, I say we were split. The 5 of us did the mock drafts for the first round this year on the show. 4 of them went quarterback. I sort of diverged from everyone else. I thought you were going to go all in on Mitch Trubisky and get a wide receiver 1. Is that a possibility, or have I already lost that one against these 4? Because I got your pick right last year, so I like to think that maybe I know a little bit.
Yeah, dude, it's definitely a possibility. It's what I'd do. I'd be way more interested in doing that. Well, if Malik Willis was there at 20, maybe I'd be tempted. But a receiver is what I would like to target. So I'm totally with you on that. Which receiver was it, out of interest?
You
remember? Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right.
You through the mud there.
Have I got my book here? Oh shit! I've got about 4 books of draft notes here. Oh fuck! Who was
Don't worry about it.
I can find it in 2 seconds. Hang on.
Well, just for the rest of you, you heard the Steelers fan there say he'd take a wide receiver. So yeah, I'm on my own again.
You also heard him say he wouldn't take Najee Harris last year. So
this is what I was going to say. My piece of advice to you, if I was to give you one, if you're doing mock drafts for the Steelers, as I said, Colbert doesn't project any smoke screens. He'll tell you who he wants, and he wants Malik Willis. They also don't care about analytics. So when it comes to last year, there's no less analytical team. I think Colbert had a quote in his pre-draft press conference about analytics the other day where he was saying, the Steelers operate within an analytics-driven world, but we will never be driven by analytics, which I thought was a cool quote. They're very anti-PFF, and PFF are anti-us. And, that's just the way it goes. And the Browns are the opposite end of the spectrum. So, if you're drafting for the Steelers, don't worry about positional value.
So the quarterback picks, you had 2 for Ridder, 2 for Pickett. Then the guest we had on at the time took Trent McDuffie. And I know, Ant, you've just logged on to the spreadsheet, so you know that you picked...
I picked Drake London because he's Amon Ra. Obviously, he's Amon Ra's teammate from last year, but USC make their guys tough. I felt like he fitted the Steelers mold for the kind of tough, heavy-going wide receiver that you want, and potentially it's a wide receiver 1, because I know you have Claypool and Johnson there, but I like them both, but I don't see a wide receiver 1 in them. Yeah. I think they need someone to lead them, and I think London will be that guy.
I think... just to give credit to Deontay Johnson, he's a wide receiver 1. If he was on a team that didn't have Big Ben throwing the ball, you'd see him as a wide receiver 1. But that aside, I agree with Drake London. Playing Twin Towers offense with Claypool and Drake London, and you bring Miles Boykin as well. He's 6'4". That'd be really exciting. Yeah, that would be my wide receiver pick. If Drake London's there, if Malik Willis is there, I'd take Drake London. So I love that pick. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you for validation. I can just use that on these guys now because they all looked at me and said you're stupid. So
I'm not saying it's the most likely thing to happen, and I'm upset that none of you picked Malik Willis either. We got Kenny Pickett, we got Desmond. Someone's going to give us Brock Purdy in a minute. What's going on?
No, that's your second rounder. You're just taking
No one will be that cruel.
No
one will be that cruel.
Brock Purdy is our kind of. He's become our mascot on our podcast. We all love Brock Purdy. Gav, who I've mentioned a couple of times, he's been talking about Brock Purdy for 3 years. He was talking about how Brock Purdy was going to be the first overall pick 3 years ago. It didn't kind of pan out that way. But when we all got to the tape, we all love Brock Purdy. That dude's a gunslinger. So I'm all for bringing him in.
We were championing, because we do our college football podcast, and we were sort of championing him pre-season as the guy who could potentially dethrone Spencer Rattler at the end of the season with Oklahoma. And he just had a rough, bad, awful, terrible, whichever way you want to put it. Yeah, Brock Purdy did. He's undrafted free agent now.
We'll take him in the 7th.
He's not even a priority one, I don't think, at this point. That's how bad he was.
Lock it in. The Steelers' 7th round picks, Brock Purdy and Connor Hayward. Cam Hayward's brother. It's going to happen.
I've got to ask the question as well, just while we've got a Steelers fan on the podcast, it would just be so remiss not to ask this question. We've just been talking about the offensive chess pieces. Surely on the roster, that guy's there, in the ex-Lions, Butterfingered tight end, Eric Ebron. I mean, I know he's a free agent now, but guys, sign him up. Manage that cap. Ebron's the guy for you.
No. It's funny because I think you told us we signed Eric Ebron. I think I came on the show last year, and I'm sure I asked you about him, and I'm sure you said the same thing. And I was like, well, I think Ebron's one of these guys that fans are going to just keep convincing themselves that he's the guy, right? Because he looks like he's the guy. He's got the draft pedigree of being the guy, but
he thinks he's the guy as well.
He thinks he's the guy, yeah. And he, he's on Twitter now, and he's, promoting his bloody crypto like a lot of these players are. And I'm just, I can't get on board with that. That's an Ebron thing to do, but yeah, dude. No, I'm okay. Pat Fryermuth, we got Gentry as our tight end too, who really came on last year. We thought he was going to get cut because he'd been there for 3 years and hadn't really done anything. And then he really came on. He's like 6'7", a complete monster. We used to colloquially call him the pink wafer because he was a big, tall, but we thought soft dude. But then last year he proved that he could be a great tight end too, a possession tight end and a guy who can get downfield and block. So we're all good on tight end. Thank you. We'll let you keep it, Eric.
You've got a great guy in Fryermuth. I completely agree. Absolute stud, and I think he's going to be a great player for you.
Fryermuth is where I've got to eat my biggest L because when we got to the second round, just before our pick, I tweeted out, Steelers, please don't take the tight end. So I own that one. That was on me.
You weren't on your own though, because we were saying there was Pitts, and then the gap was so huge to everybody else, and we all visibly questioned it. We said afterwards, it's like, God, what have they done? But then I think he put 2 touchdowns on us in preseason, and you're like, oh, hang on, this receiving thing wasn't there in college.
Yeah,
and he just carried on. I think he's one of the examples of probably the guy who surprised everyone most, probably sort of best value pick that you didn't expect in the top 100 now, possibly.
Yeah. But I just hope that whoever comes in at Mitch, and then whoever comes in after just has that same, and I'm sure they will, but that same trust in Fryermuth that Ben had, so that he can just keep getting the level of volume that he was getting.
We're just about coming to the end of our time, Simon, but why don't you talk to us about how the podcast is done since we last saw you, and then maybe we'll wrap up from there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, really good. We've been doing it now. What we on episode 139 we recorded last night, which was just an impromptu mock draft. We've done loads of stuff this week for we did the rookie game that we stole directly from PFF, where you draft the rookies from the draft class one by one and then build your own team out. So maybe I'll tag you in that, because we're going to do a little poll later on today to have people vote on who they think the best team is. I think it's obviously mine because the defense is dominant, but I'll let you guys make your own decision. But yeah, over the last year, it's been great. We've picked up a couple new people, so I think we're a little bit more like you in terms of having like different voices now. I think we, for a long time it was just me, Gav, Rich, and Dave doing the same thing. Obviously, Rich joins us from the US, and then us three sit here in the UK and talk about it. But we've picked up Ketz, whose house I'm off to tomorrow to watch the second round of the draft, and he's been awesome for us and just brought a lot of sort of enthusiasm. I'm sure you guys know, when you come and do this every week, you kind of sit down and you get used to it, right? You almost, you don't go through the motions, you're excited about it, but you get used to doing the same thing, so you almost forget that you can go out and like maybe try new things, and he's been great for that. And we've picked up Mike as well, who's just a draft expert. He's our college guy. He knows way more about college football than I ever will, and he watches sort of like 300, 400, 500 college prospects before the draft, which is something I can just absolutely not commit to. So he's been great for our depth during draft season, and yeah, we're looking forward to it, guys.
Fantastic. And where can we find you?
Everywhere podcasts are. If you want to hear some Steelers stuff in the off season, it won't be all Steelers. There'll be a lot of just NFL stuff. And in the draft season, if anyone's interested in the draft along with you guys, we purely just do draft stuff. It's not Steelers focused really at all, other than maybe talking about the Steelers fit with players. So it is really just kind of general draft content as we go through the position groups in the off season. So at UK Steelers Pod on Twitter is to find me. Please go vote on our poll later on today during the draft to decide whose team is the best. I think that's going to cause some interesting discussion. And yeah, that's the main place to find us, and obviously all the podcast places.
Cool Down Rats just finishing this off quite nicely by saying, is Simon joining us in Detroit for the draft in 2024? I think he's asking that question with pretty much everyone he likes on the show so far. So
I appreciate that.
You're in.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's great. Hey, listen, as I was saying, Ketz, who's joined us, he's obsessed with getting us out there. He's been to Pittsburgh this year. He got us a cool video with Juju Smith-Schuster shouting out the show. So he's going to drive for that. I'm all for the draft in 2024. If you guys are going, let's do it.
Sounds great. We're going to have a huge UK contingent at this point. Just want to thank you so much for your time. You've come on for a lot longer than we were anticipating.
Yeah, it's late.
The chat's just flowed, so it's been fantastic. Thank you so much, and good luck for the draft.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.
And
Take care.
yeah, I hope you get Aiden Hutchinson. I think it'll be for the best for you in the end.
We'll see.
See you later,
Right.
guys.
Cheers,
Cheers,
Simon.
man.
Bye.
All right, and I don't know if you guys want to just finishing anything off before we sign off for this one. Just any final bits about the upcoming draft? Any thoughts you want to get off your chest before we get there?
Just a quick fire question to the guys.
Air.
Oh,
Sorry,
go
I
on,
was
you
going
go.
to say, drop on air your hot takes for tonight. One each. What do you think is going to happen in this draft that no one else is predicting? I know we've done a few already, but, you know, one piece. For me, I'm going to go Sky Moore will be around one receiver. I think there's going to be 8. I think he's going to be the 8th. No one's predicting that, so. Come on, Tom. You are our hotbed factory, Tom. You are knocking these out all the time. You must have one for us here. You're gonna go on air and admit to.
The one I feel best about. So I was talking about putting some guys in the first round. So Josh Pascal is my way out there. Could be a first rounder. Drake Jackson's another guy who I think is in the 60s in the consensus big board. Who I think could be up there. The one I feel best about hot take wise is that at 32. The Lions are staring at a bunch. So Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, they've got Pickens there, maybe Sky Moore as well. All the safeties, bar Hamilton and Dax Hill are there. And I think that they don't take a receiver, a safety, or a linebacker. I think that the fans pull their hair out. They've stayed up, especially the British fans. They've stayed up till 5 a.m. They think all those guys are staring them in the face. And they end up taking someone else, mostly because Holmes talks about it a lot. That it's all best player available for him. I don't think we would have expected 2 defensive tackles to go back to back last year. So I think with all these mocks where we've got the same kind of guys, I'm expecting a bit of a surprise at 32.
Go on, Steve. What you got? Can you beat that one?
I'm saying 3 trades in the top 20. I just think the free agency has been an absolute nuclear arms race, and I just can't see it being as quiet as it's been maybe in the last couple of drafts for trades. So I'm saying 3 trades in the top 20.
And Matt finishes off. Blow our minds with your hot takeness.
I mean, so I want to do something fairly outrageous, and I'm just trying to pick the right one. I mean, so one that I feel like is going to be actually not that hot, but I'll say it anyway. The Lions don't pick at 32. I put an 80% chance of not picking at 32, either because I think we trade up or down. I think it's perfectly possible we package 32 and 34 to get into the late teens. I think it's perfectly possible we trade out at 32 to give someone a 5th-year option and pick up capital for that. So I think there's a really low chance we pick there. So I think we're going to stay up, and then it will be announced at 4 this morning that the pick has been traded, and we'll be like, oh, F this, whatever. For a really hot take, I think David Bell will go in the first round. Late first round.
Wow.
I have to like that because I've been saying for the last few months that he's been criminally disrespected. And he has been criminally disrespected.
If you want to have a look at technical runners, someone who can actually run really, really good routes and be a big-bodied guy, he's potentially the best receiver in this draft for that aspect of the game. He's just not the fastest guy in the world. But there are some guys out there who don't like analytics. Some GMs who actively out there don't like analytics. When you have a look at David Bell on tape, you'll be convinced he's one of the top wide receivers in this draft. And I think that will just mean that the draft nicks are naturally much lower on him than everyone else will be, who are actually picking. If it's not in the late early 30s, I think it will be the top half of the second. It's going to be in that sort of region. But there's several guys I think who are going to fit that mold. I think the analytics guys are going to love Brandon Smith. I think he's a top of the second round guy. I think he's going to be right up there. Who else? Kingsley Enagbare. He's 89 on the consensus board, but could easily go at 31, 30. Yeah, Daniel Falele, if there's a run of tackles in the top 10, Falele could easily get into that conversation. So there's a few guys in that fringe top 100 area who could go first round, which is nuts.
I mean, last year it was Edge that got really ramped up. The Saints took that guy who was 60th overall. I can never remember his name. But Edge was there. Sorry, Steve, I interrupted a question from you before that.
Yeah, I asked the question to Simon, but for us guys, what's going to be like the biggest gut punch for us in terms of like a scenario elsewhere in the NFC North? What really do you not want to see? And I'm going to go with mine first because it's just a feeling of utter dread. I just fear that the Vikings are going to pick up Carl Hamilton at 12. I can just see him fall in, and then I can see Goff throw in to, Carl Hamilton and Harrison Smith in the backfield, all, 2 games for the next couple of years. Just horrible thought. And also CJ will be loving it.
That's exactly mine. I think it's Hamilton to the Vikings, Burks to the Packers, who then flip their second round picks for Waller, which I would absolutely hate passionately. And for the Bears, it'd be, oh wait, no, they don't have any picks.
Trade up into the first round. I think they're picking at 48, 39 and 48. They've got 2 picks.
I was talking about this with Matt before we came on air. If there is a run on receivers, like I predict there will be early, I can see them flipping those 2 seconds to try and get up and get one, because their receiver room is nearly as bad as Atlanta's, apart from Darnell Mooney. Nearly as bad, depth-wise. So they need one. And they need offensive depth as well. So you have to go up to get a good guy. Because at 40, all the good tackles, guards, centers, receivers will be gone. The top tier ones, anyhow.
Yeah, my fear for I don't really care about anyone else other than the Packers. Minnesota are just meh to me, and the Bears are funny more than anything. Like, I've never really considered them a massive rival. Just haven't. Packers are the ones I care about, just because they're the ones that have won for the last 20 years. And it's just about that receiving core. If they build the receiving core, I hate it. And if they ignore it, I love it. So I know that we've said on the pod that if you put in Watson, some people absolutely love them taking him because they think he'll bust. And some people hate taking him because of his upside. I'm on the hate it because it seems like a really good replacement for Adams, at least in year 2 and 3, like where he could project to. Yeah, I would hate the Packers taking the receiver round 1, and it works.
Same you, Tom.
That Hamilton and Stingley is the other one for the Vikings at 12. I'm worried about. The only one I'd throw out in case he slips a bit for the Packers is Carl Affis. That would. I know I'm not as high on Carl Affis as some of you guys, but I think at that pick, and especially in that system and scheme, I'd be really, really worried.
With those 2 picks, they could take someone like Karlaftis, and they could also pick up Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Drake London. I mean, there's a lot of unpleasant scenarios out there. But obviously the dream scenario would be, they took an edge and, like a safety or something, and Rodgers was just absolutely melting down and crying on the Pat McAfee show all summer.
There we go. Right, anything more that you guys want to get off your chest before we sign off for now and come back in 12 hours' time?
Final one for me. Quick hot take. Did anyone put a running back in the first round in our mocks? No. The more I've thought about it, the more I think the Bills might take a running back at 25, because they're so solid across the board. And we were all struggling to work out where they were going to go. Their running backs are dreadful. And I was a big Zach Moss fan coming out. Singletary hasn't really moved the needle, etc. So I think probably Breece Hall or Kenny Walker, one of those guys at 25 could be a surprise, a bit like we had at 25 last year with ETN going to the Jags. So
I can't split them. I don't know which one will go first.
Yeah,
it's very, very close.
I prefer Walker, but I think the consensus is that Hall is the one guy.
I think it's purely on receiving, but Walker was never asked to be much of a receiver at Michigan State, so I think that's unfairly worked against him. I think both will be really good at the next level.
I did think about drafting a running back to the Bills, but I just think with the kind of arms race in the AFC East with, sort of Tyreek Hill and Waddle at Miami, I think they've got to take a corner. They've got to take a corner because they've only got one decent corner.
That was my logic for them as well. That's the only reason I wouldn't give them a running back. I could maybe see the Chiefs taking one if they're not sold on Edwards-Helaire still. They've got 2 picks in the first round. They spend one on what is it? What they need? They need an edge, don't they? They need an edge among like. If they go edge with Frank Clark, give someone to him. I could see them going running back.
They need wide receiver too.
There's depth in this class, though, isn't there? I don't know.
Yeah, hard one to see. I can definitely see Buffalo taking a running back, but it just seems like such a waste. Like, you can pick them up off the street. You can. So why take one there? Why not get stacked in a position where you know you need a third guy or a fourth guy? So, like, the adage is you can never have enough edge players and you can never have enough corners. And actually, they're sneaky needing a cornerback too. So I'd go cornerback there all day. Even though I went wide receiver in our mock draft and other people went corner. And you took Andrew Booth there, so which I really love. I think Booth would be a great fit.
For who?
For Buffalo.
I was going to say, he's lasting to 32. Don't you worry about that.
How many quarterbacks does everyone think will go in the first round? How many QBs do you reckon are going? I'm going 4.
2.
I'm tempted by 1, but 2 is the number which came to mind.
I think a couple will go like at 30, 31, 32. I could see someone like Matt Corral, someone trading up for our 32 and taking Matt Corral at 32.
I think the big thing, if you get past the Steelers, if the Steelers don't take one and Malik Willis is the only guy gone by then I think teams like the Giants and that will start taking interest of trading back in, because that's what I put in my mock there. I think if you get past 20 and they're all still, some teams are going to be tempted to come back up. But I think the trouble is you're going to have a run on offensive tackles early. I think you're going to have a run on wide receivers. I think what's gone before will dictate the market. I think people will be after their positions of need. And I think quarterback will just slip down because no one's getting a quarterback 1 really out of this market, whereas they need wide receiver 1s, tackle 1s, all that sort of stuff.
So I got 3 in the live mock that we did, which was Pickett at 6, Willis at 8, and Ridder at 20. But if the rumours are true, that at the Senior Bowl, the Lions were talking about a QB they could turn into a Pro Bowler, and apparently that wasn't Willis, it was Sam Howell. And now we've got Jeff Risdon in his 7-round mock draft taking Sam Howell at 34 with someone else at 32, which I just don't understand and make sense. I think that Howell could go 32 to the Lions. I think that could happen, or I think Howell could go anywhere at 32 to anyone who wants to trade up for him. Or, as Steve said, Corral. So I could buy 4.
You're just siding with Jeff now, aren't you? After his last match. Saying that, I could never be mad at a Sam Howell pick. As much as I wouldn't want to go quarterback, I would never be mad at it. I think low-key be the one I'd love the most.
What's the betting market on 4 QBs? What's the market saying?
It's low. I mean, there's some good betting markets on this. I think Hamilton's like there's an over/under of him being drafted by 11 or something like that. It's like just smash the up on that. He'll go before 11, I reckon.
Well, I think 11 is his floor. I think that he will go at 11 if he's there.
The odds are pretty good though. There's some good odds knocking round.
I will have a quick look just before we sign off because I am interested.
I know receivers are at 6.5. Over under on that, which I could get behind. I think they'll be 8. I think it can be even more. I think that's worth going after. It's what I have.
I don't have a market for that, annoyingly, in that I use. But anyway, never mind. We'll do that another time. Any further things before we sign off? No. And
What's that?
Glad draft day is here. Gonna finally find out who's gonna be the next Detroit Lions, and then we can all get back to being friends again.
Ike Ekwonu. No.
There we go. Right, let me just quickly let you guys know who we have coming up, which is annoying to do because I have actually closed the right thing. Where is the list? There's the list.
Falcons.
Okay.
The Falcons just confirmed.
They did. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you for everyone for joining us so far. We will be back at midnight UK time, which is 7 p.m. Eastern time in the States. We will be joined by, some of these are TBC, but most of them are penciled in. Most of them are in pen, in fact. So Lance Falcons UK will be our first guest, quickly followed by the British and Irish Eagles. We'll then have Cal in Seoul, who's a Jets fan who we're having a collab with to do with the history of the two franchises. He'll come on and chat with us. in the middle of the first round. Arrowheads Abroad will have Neil on again. He was on with us last year. Cowboys UK are going to come on after their picks. That might be around 3 a.m. UK time, 10 p.m. US time, Eastern time. And then James Kirkham's going to round us off. He's the Patriots fan we had on last year, and he was terrific. We have just had a question, but it just says, "What's your opinion on?" And then it doesn't say anything else. I'll leave you 30 seconds to get in the rest of that question. If not, we'll move on. Talk about the rest of the days. We have Jets UK podcast coming on our preview show tomorrow morning, this time tomorrow, and the Turn Up for What podcast. We had them both on last year. You can check them out. I think that's Andres with the Jets UK podcast, and I can't remember the name of the guy from Turn Up for What, but he was fantastic. Ewan, yes, he was terrific. And then Seahawks UK are in, and several others are TBC on day 2's show. We've got the Red, White and Buffalo Bills. We've got the Jags across the pond. We've got Bucks UK, British Bird Gang, which is a Cardinals fan group. And then we've got our old friend Ryan Dangle from the Bears. We've also got Stay Diddy, who hopefully will be coming on from the Packers show. CJ from the Vikings, who we've had on a few times, will be here too. If you want to get a perspective, not from, we don't know that much about the Vikings, really. Like, we know a bit more than maybe a team outside the NFC North, but we don't know as much as a Vikings fan would. We don't know as much as, obviously, a Steelers fan would about what they want to do in this draft. If you want to know what's going to happen in this draft, or have a better idea than you do right now, stick with us all the way through the next 3 or 4 days. You're going to get some really good stuff.
Might learn something.
Sorry?
You might learn something.
You might learn something. I'll definitely learn
Or
something.
you might not.
But for now, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you in about 12 hours' time. Here we go, boys. It's happening. Let's go, Lions. One pride.
One pride.